On a freezing night at the Bozeman docks, Officer Olivia Barnes thought it was just another quiet patrol with her canine partner, Ranger. But when the German Shepherd froze at the sight of a woman dragging a heavy suitcase, his growls cut through the roar of the waves. Inside wasn't clothes or jewelry, but a glass case writhing with thousands of deadly black ants, a weapon coveted by the underworld. Within hours, Olivia and Ranger would uncover a smuggling ring powerful enough to poison an entire city. This is a story of instinct, courage, and a dog who refused to be silenced. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments so we can see how far this story travels. Montana's winter coast could freeze the marrow of anyone who dared walk it at night. At the Bozeman docks, the river widened into a black expanse, its surface broken by chunks of ice drifting like silent rafts. The fog hung heavy and unrelenting, crawling low across the wooden planks and coiling around the iron hulls of moored ships. Sodium lamps sputtered in the mist, their pale light bending against the fog until the shadows of containers and cranes stretched into monstrous forms. The wind carried salt and the sour tang of diesel, biting at the cheeks of those few souls who worked through the long night. It was the kind of cold that lived inside bones and made every sound sharper, every movement feel watched. Officer Olivia Barnes walked the line of Pier C with her partner at her side. At 38, Olivia carried herself with the economy of a professional who had seen enough nights like this to know when to hurry and when to pace. She was lean, auburn hair bound tightly beneath her cap, her green eyes cutting through fog with a vigilance born of both habit and memory. Once, years ago, her niece had gone missing for 3 terrible days before being found alive. The ordeal had carved something permanent into Olivia's way of being. She no longer trusted silence. If something seemed calm, she searched for the fracture beneath it. Her companion, Ranger, was a 5-year-old German Shepherd whose body moved with coiled grace. 65 pounds of disciplined muscle, his coat shimmered in black and russet under the dim lamps. A scar cut across the corner of his right eye, a small pale mark from a trailer fire in Missoula, where, as a pup, he had refused to leave the body of the elderly woman he loved until fire crews pulled him away. That loyalty had been etched into him. Later, trainers recognized his unusual instinct. He was not a dog who sniffed out drugs or bombs, but one who read people. Ranger could sense agitation, deceit, and danger in the way a body carried its weight or a voice lingered on a word. Olivia trusted that intuition more than she trusted most humans. The docks bustled faintly, even at this hour. Dalton Rivera, a forklift operator with a heavy beard and a chest like a barrel, maneuvered pallets of cargo with surprising delicacy. Once quick-tempered, he had reformed his life after nearly losing his marriage. Now his humor was warm, his nod respectful as Olivia passed. Near the security gate stood Kendra Shaw, a young guard barely into her 20s, curly hair tucked under a wool cap. She was nervous but diligent, her clipboard hugged to her chest like armor. These were the ordinary people of the night shift, figures half faded by fog, each with their own quiet battles. Olivia and Ranger pressed on toward the far pier where fog swallowed the view. Ranger's gait slowed. His ears tilted forward. Olivia felt the leash tighten just slightly, that subtle signal she had learned never to ignore. His muscles shifted beneath his coat. His breathing grew deliberate. Something was wrong. Through the mist, a figure emerged. A woman stepped off the gangway of a recently docked cargo vessel, pulling a large suitcase that rattled against the seams of the planks. She was tall, nearly 6 feet, with a slender build that spoke of discipline rather than fragility. Her black hair, glossy and severe, was pulled into a low knot. Her coat was charcoal gray, tailored to her form, falling to mid-calf with crisp lines. A silk scarf of deep blue circled her neck, the kind of accessory that whispered expense. Her skin was pale, not unhealthy, but cultivated, like someone more accustomed to conference halls than to sun. She walked with unhurried confidence, her suitcase rolling behind her in steady rhythm. Olivia studied her carefully. The woman's composure seemed too smooth, her pace too controlled for the icy dock. Most travelers hurried through this kind of cold, but this woman moved as if the weather existed for someone else. Ranger stopped entirely, his body tensed, tail rigid, eyes locked on the suitcase. A low rumble rose from his chest, not bark, not whine. Something deeper, more primal, a sound that spoke of warning. The woman glanced toward the dog, her expression calm, almost amused, though her gloved hand drew the suitcase closer to her side. She continued walking, her stride unbroken, as if the German Shepherd's challenge were nothing more than an inconvenience. Olivia felt her heart pick up. Ranger rarely growled. He was trained for subtlety, to alert with shifts of body and breath. A growl meant the line between suspicion and danger had already been crossed. Olivia adjusted her stance, her boots firm on the slick wood. She raised her voice evenly, letting it carry over the water's hush. "Evening, ma'am. Port Authority, K9 unit. May I speak with you a moment?" The woman slowed, finally halting a few feet away. Up close, her features sharpened. High cheekbones, eyes a glacial blue that seemed to calculate rather than connect, lips painted in a shade too dark for casual travel. She smiled politely, though the smile did not reach her eyes. "Of course, officer." "Is there a problem?" Her voice was smooth, practiced, and strangely neutral, without the edges most people carried in their tone. Ranger growled again, louder this time, stepping forward to place his body between Olivia and the suitcase. His ears stood sharp as blades, his gaze fixed unrelentingly. The woman's hand flexed on the handle, her jaw tightening just slightly before relaxing again. Olivia's instincts whispered caution. The fog swirled around them, muting the distant hum of engines and the faint calls of dock workers. Time seemed to pause in that narrow stretch of pier, reduced to a woman, a suitcase, and a dog who refused to be ignored. And in that moment, Olivia knew. Whatever was in that suitcase, Ranger had already decided it did not belong. The fog thickened along the pier, wrapping the dock in a hush that made every creak of timber sound like a warning. Olivia Barnes squared her shoulders, keeping her voice even as Ranger stood taut, his hackles lifting in a way that told her the dog had already chosen his verdict. The woman adjusted her grip on the suitcase handle and turned her face toward the officer. "My name is Vanessa Reed," she said, each word rolled out with calculated smoothness. She was in her early 30s, tall and poised, her glossy black hair bound in a low knot that looked too neat for a journey across rough seas. Her skin was pale, as though she lived under fluorescent lights more than the sun, and her glacial blue eyes carried something sharper than politeness. Her posture was one of controlled elegance, yet a faint twitch at the corner of her lips betrayed strain. Ranger stepped forward and barked, a sharp, booming sound that startled the gulls from the pier posts. The German Shepherd's chest expanded with the effort, his tail stiff, his gaze fixed unyieldingly on the suitcase. Olivia felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her voice steady. "Ma'am, I'll need you to stop right here." "What's in the case?" Vanessa's gloved hands tightened. She offered a smile meant to be disarming, but it carried no warmth. "I've just arrived from the international line. Research samples. I'm headed to a hotel. Nothing unusual." She brushed a strand of damp hair back behind her ear. though the fog had not been kind enough to undo her polished appearance. The suitcase wheels clattered against the dock as she shifted it closer to her side, and in that movement, Olivia caught the glisten of sweat forming just beneath Vanessa's hairline, out of place in the biting cold. From behind, Dalton Rivera cut his forklift engine, the sudden silence like a bell toll. His broad figure leaned out of the cabin, eyes narrowed under thick brows. Dalton had worked the docks long enough to know when a traveler's story rang false. Years ago, he had lost his job for fighting during a drunken rage, but the man had rebuilt his life with patience and sobriety. And tonight, his instincts felt the same tension as Ranger's. He didn't interfere, but his heavy beard twitched as his jaw set tight. Olivia noted the crowding of moments, Ranger's relentless stance, Vanessa's restless eyes, Dalton's silent watch from the background. She shifted her stance, placing herself between Vanessa and the shadowed edge of the pier. The water slapped at the pilings below with a rhythm like a drumbeat, steady, unforgiving. "Research samples," Olivia repeated. "From which facility?" Vanessa's eyes flicked right, then left, calculating exits. "Private company, biotech. The name isn't important." Her voice faltered just slightly, and Ranger barked again, louder this time, reverberating across the dock. The sound drew Kendra Shaw from her post near the gate. The young security guard approached cautiously, her clipboard clutched tight against her chest. She was petite and wide-eyed, her curly hair escaping from her cap as she hurried over. Her expression held a mixture of fear and duty. She had never witnessed Ranger raise alarm this way. "Officer Barnes," Kendra said softly, "is something wrong?" Olivia didn't take her eyes off Vanessa. "Stand back, Shaw." "This may escalate." The woman shifted her weight, boots grinding softly against the wooden boards. The fog gathered around her shoulders like a cloak. Her face remained smooth, but the sweat at her temple grew. Olivia recognized the pattern. Someone calculating lies faster than their body could mask them. Ranger's growl dropped into a low, vibrating rumble. Olivia placed a calming hand on his back, but didn't command silence. She trusted him too much for that. The German shepherd had seen more than paperwork could describe, his instincts sharpened by trauma and training. His amber-brown eyes now burned holes into the matte suitcase. "You'll need to open that," Olivia said, her tone clipped, no longer conversational. "Here and now." Vanessa's lips parted, a protest forming, but she swallowed it quickly. Her voice, when it came, was still smooth but thinner, strained at the edges. "That's unnecessary. These are sensitive specimens. Exposure could ruin them. That's a risk I'm prepared to take," Olivia said firmly. The standoff tightened, fog pressing in like the closing of curtains. Vanessa's long fingers twitched against the zipper pull, but didn't move it. Her blue eyes flicked once more toward the distant parking lot where a black car idled faintly through the mist, its outline barely visible, but Olivia noticed. Someone was waiting. Dalton muttered under his breath from his forklift, though his words carried through the silence. "Something's off, officer." His voice was gravelly, worn down by years of smoke and regret, but there was no mistaking the edge of concern. Vanessa's shoulders squared. Her mask of calm was cracking now. Olivia saw her throat work as she swallowed hard, saw the small tremor in her hand as she adjusted her scarf. She was a woman trying to keep control, but failing under the pressure of eyes, suspicion, and a dog who would not yield. Ranger took another step forward, body rigid, his deep bark exploding into the night once more. It silenced even the gulls. Vanessa flinched, and in that instant Olivia knew. The woman was not merely a traveler, she was a problem waiting to be unzipped. The dock was silent except for the low thrum of water beneath the pier, and Ranger's steady growl, vibrating through the leash like a live wire. Vanessa Reed's hand lingered on the zipper pull, her breath fogging in short, shallow bursts despite the bitter cold. Olivia Barnes stood still, her posture measured, her green eyes narrowed, her voice calm but iron underneath. "Ms. Reed, unzip the case." Now the words carried the weight of command, and even the fog seemed to hang in place to listen. Vanessa's expression shifted, the icy blue of her eyes flashing with calculation. She was still elegant, tall, composed in her tailored coat, but her pale skin betrayed a faint tremor under the lamplight. Her lips pressed together as if sealing a secret. She gave a short laugh, dry and brittle, before tugging the zipper downward. The suitcase yawned open with a hiss of metal teeth. The crowding fog could not conceal what was inside. Olivia's breath caught. Dalton Rivera, still perched on his forklift, let out a low curse. Kendra Shaw clapped a hand over her mouth, clipboard forgotten. Inside the suitcase sat a reinforced glass case, its thick panes fogged from condensation. Within, a living tide shifted and crawled. Thousands of large black ants, their bodies glistening like drops of oil, their mandibles clicking against the walls of their prison. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. The busy percussion of a colony confined. Olivia took an instinctive step back, her training flaring warnings in her head. Ranger barked once, the noise sharp and commanding, his eyes locked on the insects with an intensity that mirrored his handler's unease. The ants moved in restless waves, surging against the glass as if aware they had been revealed. Dalton climbed down from his forklift, heavy boots thudding against the planks. He was a broad man with a thick neck and a beard gone more salt than pepper, but his steps faltered as he drew near. Once, he had been a brawler, fists solving the problems his mouth couldn't, but years of regret had softened his edges. Now he stood frozen, eyes wide, voice hoarse. "Jesus, those aren't normal ants." Olivia shot him a sharp glance. "Stay back, Rivera." Kendra, her youthful nerves trembling beneath her uniform, whispered, "What are they?" Olivia didn't answer immediately. She knew enough to recognize danger when it sat only feet away. The insects were too large, their movements too coordinated, too violent. She leaned closer just enough to see the label etched faintly onto the glass. Paraponera amazonica. Her heart sank. The name belonged to a species whispered about in security briefings, Amazonian bullet ants, infamous for their venom, a sting that caused pain described as waves of burning fire. But these were no wild specimens. They were modified, larger, more aggressive. She had heard rumors from federal contacts, cartels and black market syndicates experimenting with these insects, weaponizing colonies as tools of torture, intimidation, or worse. They were known in criminal circles as death swarms. Vanessa straightened her shoulders, regaining some of her icy composure now that the secret was out. "I told you they were research samples," she said smoothly, though the tension in her jaw betrayed her. "Highly valuable. Worth more than you can imagine. Mishandling them could cause complications." Ranger let out another bark, this one louder, silencing her words. His ears pinned forward, tail rigid, as he placed himself between Olivia and the suitcase. His instincts shouted that this was no scientific pursuit. Olivia's training clicked into place. She raised her radio, her voice clipped. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7 at Pier C. Confirm immediate backup. We have hazardous biological contraband. Repeat, hazardous biological contraband. Suspect in custody. Request containment team." The radio hissed back acknowledgement. Vanessa's mask slipped at the word custody. Her lips curved into something between a sneer and a smile. You don't understand. Those colonies are priceless. Entire organizations rely on them. If you interfere, you'll draw attention you cannot handle." Dalton spat on the dock, a rare display of anger. "Lady, you brought poison onto our pier, that's all that matters." His voice cracked at the memory of a nephew once lost to gang violence, a scar that made his temper flare when crime brushed close to home. Kendra took a cautious step closer to Olivia, her eyes wide but her chin raised with fragile bravery. "Officer Barnes, what do we do with her?" Olivia didn't flinch. Her mind was already mapping out the scene. Vanessa's calm facade cracking under pressure, Ranger's unwavering vigilance, the suitcase of death barely contained in its glass prison. "We wait for backup," she said firmly, "and we don't let her or that case out of sight." The ants churned, their movements forming dark patterns against the glass. It was as if they sensed the tension, the shift of power. Ranger lowered himself into a crouch, muscles taut, a low rumble building in his throat. Olivia placed her hand lightly on his back, feeling the strength trembling beneath his fur. The night at the docks had turned from routine to nightmare in a single unzipping. What had begun as suspicion now stood revealed as a biological weapon capable of devastation. And though Olivia held her composure, she knew this was only the beginning. The dock seemed to hold its breath, every sound drowned beneath the restless chittering of the ants in the glass case. Vanessa Reed's composure cracked at last. The smooth mask she had worn since stepping off the ship dissolved into sharp lines of fear and fury. Her pale skin gleamed with a sheen of sweat despite the freezing air. Her blue eyes narrowed into slits of calculation. In a single swift motion, she yanked her coat pocket open and drew out a small silver canister. Before Olivia could react, Vanessa pressed down on the nozzle. A burst of pepper spray hissed through the mist, the acrid cloud searing eyes and throats. Olivia turned her head, her green eyes watering instantly, but she did not loosen her grip on the leash. Ranger lunged forward, teeth bared, his powerful body jerking the line taut. Dalton Rivera cursed loudly, his barrel-chested frame ducking behind the forklift cabin, while young Kendra Shaw stumbled back, coughing into her scarf, eyes streaming as the chemical bit into her lungs. Vanessa seized the moment, snapping the suitcase shut with a practiced flick and bolting toward the far pier. The wheels rattled loudly on the wooden planks, echoing like gunfire. Her long legs carried her fast, her tall frame slicing through the fog, black hair whipping loose from its knot. She moved like someone who had run before, who knew escape as second nature. Olivia blinked through the burn, forcing herself forward. Years of training, years of refusing to let trauma control her steps, now propelled her after the fleeing suspect. She pressed the radio to her shoulder, voice ragged but strong. "Suspect fleeing Pier C, armed with hazardous contraband. Pursuit in progress." Ranger surged ahead, unbothered by the sting in his eyes. His deep bark split the night, each note a command to stop. His powerful stride ate the distance between himself and Vanessa, claws scraping sparks off the damp planks as he pushed harder. The chase drove them onto the narrow wooden bridge that jutted out toward the older part of the harbor. The boards creaked and groaned beneath their weight, the smell of sea rot thick here. A derelict freighter loomed at the end of the pier, its hull rusted and pocked with holes, windows shattered, the nameplate barely legible. It had been abandoned for years, a skeleton of industry left to rot in salt and silence. Tonight, it stood waiting like a stage for the final act. Vanessa sprinted, her suitcase bouncing against her side. Her breath came ragged, clouding the air, but she did not falter. She was a woman hardened by desperation, her tall frame driven forward by a will sharpened into a blade. Her pale skin flushed red from the exertion, her scarf loose, flapping wildly behind her. Behind her came Olivia, boots pounding with iron rhythm, the sting of the pepper spray forgotten under the chase's urgency. She was fast, but Ranger was faster. The dog's body was a machine of instinct and discipline, his russet and black, coat blurring with motion, his scarred eye glinting like a beacon. Dalton, coughing hard, had staggered onto the pier but stayed behind, his heavy body too slow for the sprint. Instead, he shouted after them, his deep voice carrying encouragement and warning both. "Get her, officer! Don't let her vanish!" Kendra, still clutching her clipboard as though it mattered, radioed frantically for backup, her voice trembling but clear as she relayed their location to dispatch. Vanessa glanced over her shoulder, her icy eyes widening as she saw Ranger closing in. With a desperate cry, she yanked the suitcase higher, clutching it to her chest as though it were a child. She pushed harder, shoes slipping on the damp wood, her tall figure staggering but refusing to fall. The old freighter loomed closer, its rust-streaked hull reflecting the beam of a spotlight from a nearby patrol boat. The moment stretched. Ranger launched himself forward. His powerful body struck Vanessa's legs with precision, the impact sending her sprawling to the pier. The suitcase clattered down, rolling dangerously close to the edge before Olivia's quick hand seized the handle. Vanessa hit the planks with a sharp cry, her pale face twisting in pain as she thrashed beneath the shepherd's weight. Ranger stood over her, jaws bared but controlled, his growl vibrating through the night like thunder. Olivia was on her in seconds, pinning her arms, snapping cold steel cuffs around her wrists. Vanessa cursed, her voice raw, spitting venom as much as words. The suitcase lay between them, heavy and ominous. Olivia flipped it open just enough to ensure the glass case inside had not broken. The swarm of ants seethed, clicking their mandibles against the walls, a dark tide contained only by fragile barriers. Olivia's stomach clenched at the sight, but relief tempered her fear. The danger was still caged. For now. As she searched Vanessa's coat pockets, Olivia's fingers brushed against folded papers sealed in plastic. She pulled them free. Maps, invoices, coded ledgers, and a flash drive labeled only with numbers. Evidence. Proof that this was not the work of a lone smuggler, but the hand of something larger, darker, international, a network that trafficked in death disguised as insects. Ranger stood vigilant, his breath fogging in steady rhythm, his eyes locked on Vanessa as though daring her to try again. The woman, once composed and elegant, now looked broken on the planks. Hair wild, scarf torn, pale skin marked red where the dog had pinned her. Yet even cuffed, her blue eyes glittered with cold defiance. She was dangerous still, Olivia knew, but no longer free. The waves slapped angrily against the pilings, gulls shrieked from the rusted freighter, and the spotlight from the patrol boat swept over them once more. The night had turned against Vanessa Reed, and the truth of her suitcase had chained her to a fate she could not outrun. The night at the docks had finally settled after Vanessa Reed was dragged away in cuffs, her blue eyes still flashing with defiance as she was loaded into a patrol van. Olivia Barnes remained behind with Ranger, her chest heaving in the cold air, the suitcase of ants secured in a containment crate now surrounded by flashing lights. But Olivia's focus was already shifting from the woman to what she had found inside Vanessa's coat. A bundle of sealed papers, invoices with foreign stamps, and a flash drive marked only with a string of numbers. Evidence rarely told stories cleanly, but tonight the clues seemed to hum with urgency. Back at the precinct's operations room, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The space smelled of old coffee, wet wool, and the faint tang of printer toner. Olivia sat at a steel desk, green eyes narrowing as she flipped through the documents. Ranger lay at her boots, head resting on his paws, his scarred eye twitching whenever the room grew too quiet. Among the papers were maps with coded annotations. Olivia noticed one location circled twice: a warehouse on the outskirts of town, its name scrubbed from any official registry. The invoices revealed bulk shipments listed as agricultural materials, but traced back to known cartel routes. The flash drive, when decrypted by the precinct's IT technician, a wiry man named Ethan Clark with wire-rimmed glasses, sandy hair that fell into his eyes, and fingers quick from years of gaming and coding, revealed something more sinister. The drive contained spreadsheets of sales, coded references to colonies, and encrypted emails. Ethan, 29, and built with the lean awkwardness of someone who spent more time hunched over keyboards than under the sun, leaned back in his chair and rubbed the stubble along his jaw. His brown eyes were sharp, but ringed with fatigue. Once, years ago, he had nearly been expelled from college for hacking into his university's systems, but that brush with the law had turned into a career when a forward-thinking detective offered him a chance to work for law enforcement instead. Tonight, his skills proved invaluable. "This isn't just smuggling," Ethan muttered. "It's logistics. They're breeding those ants in controlled environments. And this warehouse?" He tapped the screen. "It's the hub." Olivia's stomach tightened. She had seen many criminal enterprises, but none that played with nature like a weapon. "Whoever runs it," she said quietly, "they're not just pushing product. They're experimenting." Captain Harris stepped into the room, a man in his early 50s with a square jaw softened by years of stress and a gray mustache trimmed neatly above his lip. His shoulders were still broad from his days in SWAT, though a slight limp in his left leg betrayed the bullet wound he had taken a decade ago during a raid gone wrong. Known for his bluntness, Harris was respected and sometimes feared by his officers. He leaned over Olivia's shoulder, scanning the maps. "We've heard whispers about this," he admitted, his deep voice gravelly, "but never had a location. If this is what I think it is, it's the central nest." Ethan swiveled in his chair. "Encrypted messages mention shipments to Chicago, Houston, even across the border. They're distributing these colonies like narcotics." Olivia clenched her jaw. Ranger lifted his head, sensing her tension, his amber eyes locking on her face with wordless solidarity. Harris straightened, folding his arms across his chest. "We can't let this sit. I'll get the special response team ready. Barnes, you and your dog are coming with us. You've got eyes on the suspect, you found the evidence. We'll need you when we hit this place." Olivia nodded, her auburn hair catching the harsh light. She had never been one to hesitate when action was required, but even so, a sliver of unease moved through her. This wasn't just another bust. This was a hornet's nest disguised as a warehouse, and they were about to kick it open. Later that night, at the tactical staging area on the edge of town, engines idled in the dark. The warehouse lay a few miles ahead, shrouded in trees and industrial fencing. Olivia studied the aerial photos pinned to the hood of a squad SUV. The building was large, concrete-sided, with no signage and only a single gated entrance. Generator lights glowed faintly through grimy windows. Around her, members of the special response team checked weapons and communications. One of them, Sergeant Marcus "Mac" Donnelly, a rugged man in his 40s with close-cropped hair, a crooked nose broken long ago in a bar fight, and tattoos peeking from under his sleeves, walked over. Mac was the kind of man who carried scars like medals. He had served in the Marines, seen combat overseas, and returned with both loyalty and cynicism in equal measure. "You sure about this, Barnes?" he asked, his voice low but steady. "Places like this don't go down without a fight." Olivia met his gaze. "I'm sure." She glanced at Ranger, who stood alert beside her, his ears high, his breath visible in the cold night air. And so is he. Mac smirked faintly, shaking his head. Never thought I'd see the day when a dog gave me more confidence than half the men I've served with. Captain Harris arrived then, his limp noticeable as he approached the group. We're going in quiet. No sirens, no lights. If these people are breeding biological weapons, we can't risk them scattering. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we shut it down. The team nodded, the tension palpable. Olivia clipped Ranger's harness tighter, whispering a command into his ear. His scarred eye gleamed as he leaned into her leg, ready. The convoy began to roll, tires crunching softly on gravel roads. Olivia sat in the lead SUV, her heart pounding not from fear but from anticipation. The warehouse waited, in the distance, its shadow looming against the tree line. Ranger sat tall beside her, ears twitching, nose lifting to scent the night. Whatever waited inside, they would face it together. The convoy rolled through the gravel road in near silence, headlights killed, engines humming low. The forest pressed tight on either side, skeletal trees reaching like dark fingers toward the sky. Ahead, the warehouse loomed, a concrete block of a building squatting at the tree line, its narrow windows dimly lit, the glow of generators leaking into the mist. Olivia Barnes sat in the lead SUV, her heart steady, her hand resting on Ranger's harness. The German shepherd sat upright, muscles tense, ears pricked, his amber eyes locked on the structure that smelled of oil, metal, and something far more dangerous. Captain Harris exited the SUV first, his limp more pronounced on the uneven ground. He raised a clenched fist, signaling the convoy to halt. Harris, his gray mustache damp with fog, barked orders in a low growl. Form up. 2 squads to the south wall, 1 to the east. Barnes, you and Ranger are with me. His gravelly voice carried authority sharpened by decades of scars. Sergeant Marcus Donnelly, Mac to his comrades, checked his rifle with calm precision. His crooked nose and the faded ink of an eagle tattoo stretched across his forearm caught the faint light. He nodded toward Olivia. Stay close. These bastards won't go down easy. The team spread out, shadows blending into the night. Olivia crouched low, following Harris and Mac toward a side door rusting on its hinges. Ethan Clark, the IT specialist, had joined reluctantly, his lanky frame awkward under a borrowed Kevlar vest, laptop slung across his shoulder. His pale face glistened with sweat, but his fingers moved with confidence as he jacked into a nearby panel. Got it, he whispered, his sandy hair falling into his glasses. The lock clicked open. Inside, the warehouse breathed dampness and rot. The air was thick with the scent of soil and something acrid, a chemical undertone that prickled the back of the throat. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, throwing pale shadows across rows of crates stacked like tombstones. Ranger padded silently, nose twitching, the scar near his eye catching the glow. Olivia felt the leash tug gently. His way of telling her danger lay close. The squad moved deeper, boots whispering against concrete. A voice rang out from the far end of the warehouse, sharp, commanding. They're here! The silence shattered. Gunfire erupted, flashes strobing in the gloom, the crack of rifles clashing with shouted orders. The team spread out, returning fire with disciplined bursts. Harris shouted commands, his gravelly tone cutting through the chaos like a blade. From behind a stack of crates emerged a man of imposing stature, broad shoulders beneath a leather jacket, face carved in hard lines, beard thick and streaked with gray. His eyes were dark, cold, and calculating. This was Victor Cross, the warehouse overseer. Once a mercenary in Eastern Europe, he had built a reputation as a man who thrived in lawless zones. His nose was crooked. From an old break, his knuckles swollen from years of violence. He was known among criminals for his brutality and his loyalty to no one but profit. Cross barked orders in a guttural accent, waving his men into cover. His hand clutched a black cylinder, a trigger wired to a reinforced glass chamber at the warehouse's center. Olivia's blood ran cold as she saw what it controlled. A massive containment unit, larger than the suitcase Vanessa had carried, housing swarms of the modified Amazonian ants. Hundreds of glass cases stacked inside, each one a weapon waiting to be unleashed. "Cover that trigger!" Olivia shouted, her voice sharp. Ranger growled, muscles coiled. Gunfire whined past. Mac advanced with ruthless efficiency, firing controlled bursts, his Marine training etched into every motion. Harris, despite his limp, stood firm, his pistol steady, his voice barking corrections and rallying his squad. Ethan crouched behind a crate, hands trembling as he yanked cables from a junction box, trying to disable power to the containment system. His breath came ragged, his glasses sliding down his nose. Victor Cross sneered, his beard bristling. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. These colonies are worth more than all your lives." He raised the trigger device. Ranger exploded forward before Olivia could command. The shepherd's body was a missile of fur and muscle, his bark echoing like thunder. He lunged at Cross, jaws clamping down on the man's arm, the device clattering to the floor. Cross roared, swinging a fist into Ranger's flank, but the dog held fast, teeth sunk deep, growl vibrating through the chaos. Olivia sprinted, sliding across the concrete to kick the trigger device away. She leveled her sidearm, green eyes blazing, and shouted, "Drop it, Cross!" The mercenary staggered under Ranger's grip, his cold eyes burning with hate. He tried to reach for a pistol tucked in his belt, but Mac was faster. The sergeant's shot cracked through the air, striking the weapon from Cross's grasp. Harris moved in with cuffs, his limp slowing him, but his resolve unshaken. Together they forced the struggling man down. Ranger released his bite at Olivia's command, standing over Cross with bared teeth, his breath heaving, ears rigid. The overseer was subdued, pinned under Harris's knee, his gray beard damp with sweat and blood. The warehouse fell into silence, save for the hiss of broken lights and the faint, unsettling buzz of thousands of ants behind glass. Squad members secured the perimeter, rounding up the remaining criminals who had surrendered or fallen in the firefight. Ethan finally looked up from his work, glasses fogged, but his voice steady. "Power to the containment system is cut. The colonies are secure." For now, Olivia exhaled, chest tight. Around her lay crates marked for destinations across the continent, each a weapon shipment waiting to spread. She ran a hand down Ranger's coat, feeling the tremor of his exhausted muscles. His amber eyes met hers, scar glinting, and in them she saw the same unspoken truth. Tonight, they had stopped something monstrous. By dawn, every crate was tagged and sealed by hazmat teams, dozens of cages lined up like captured nightmares. Victor Cross and his men were shackled, their empire broken. The night raid had ended with fire and fury, but the dockside warehouse, the heart of the operation, was no more. Dawn broke over Montana's coast with a pale light, turning the mist that lingered above the Bozeman docks into a gauzy veil. The chaos of the night raid was gone, replaced by the quiet rhythm of waves slapping against pylons and the distant cries of gulls circling overhead. Patrol boats drifted lazily, their lights dimmed, while hazmat trucks rumbled away with sealed crates, each one containing nightmares that would never be unleashed on the world. Olivia Barnes stood on the pier, her navy coat pulled tight against the early chill. Her auburn hair had come loose from its bun, damp tendrils framing her tired but steady face. Her green eyes, still sharp despite the exhaustion pooling beneath them, scanned the water as if she needed proof that it was really over. Beside her, Ranger sat tall, his russet and black coat flecked with dried salt and dust from the raid. His ears were erect, his scarred eye half closed from fatigue, but his body remained coiled and alert, as though he hadn't yet allowed himself to rest. Captain Harris approached slowly, his limp more pronounced in the morning light. His square jaw was shadowed with stubble, his gray mustache damp with dew. He looked like a man who carried both victory and weight on his shoulders. He stopped beside Olivia, folding his arms across his chest. "You did good work," he said. His gravelly voice softened in the quiet. "You and the dog both." Olivia gave a small nod, her hand brushing Ranger's fur. "We stopped something terrible." Her voice was calm, but in it lived the fatigue of someone who had walked too close to disaster and come back. From farther down the pier came Ethan Clark, the young IT technician, his sandy hair in disarray, glasses slipping down his nose. His thin frame looked even thinner beneath the oversized tactical vest he hadn't yet returned. He clutched his laptop bag like a lifeline, but his brown eyes glowed with a quiet pride. "The data we seized is already being processed," he said, voice carrying across the wood. "We'll trace every buyer, every shipment. This wasn't just a bust. It's a map of their entire network." Olivia offered him a faint smile. Ethan was nervous and awkward, but his talent had turned whispers of crime into proof, and that mattered. Sergeant Marcus "Mac" Donnelly joined them next, his rugged frame moving with the loose gait of a man who had carried weapons his entire adult life. His crooked nose and faded tattoos marked him as a soldier of old battles, and the half-smirk on his face suggested relief tempered with caution. "Still can't believe a damn dog brought down Victor Cross," he said, shaking his head. "That mutt's got more guts than most men I served with." Ranger tilted his head at the sound of his name, ears flicking, amber eyes steady. Mac gave a chuckle and reached down to scratch behind the shepherd's ear. "Good boy," he muttered, sincerity hiding under gruffness. As the others drifted back to their duties, Olivia remained on the pier. She sat on the weathered boards, letting her legs dangle over the side, the cold spray of the river reaching her boots. Ranger settled beside her, lowering himself with a sigh, his body pressing against her hip. She ran her hand down his back, feeling the rise and fall of his steady breathing. Her gaze lingered on the horizon, where the sun rose pale and golden. In the quiet, she thought of the ants, the crates, the faces of the criminals now in custody. She thought of how close those creatures had come to spilling free, to being shipped into cities where innocent lives would have been torn apart by terror no one could have expected. And then she looked at Ranger, the scar near his eye, the unwavering loyalty in his stare. "Sometimes," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the waves, "God sends us angels. Not with wings, but with fur. Guardians who see what we can't." Ranger shifted, pressing his head into her palm, as if acknowledging the truth of her words. The German shepherd wasn't just a partner. He was proof that instinct, loyalty, and courage could hold back darkness when nothing else could. The morning went on, gulls scattering against the rising sun, the pier alive again with the sounds of ordinary work. But Olivia knew the night they had lived through would never be ordinary again. Thanks to a dog who refused to be silenced, a biological catastrophe had been stopped before it began. And in that moment, as the waves carried the sound of the sea against the dock, she felt certain. Ranger wasn't only her partner. He was humanity's silent guardian, watching, waiting, ready. In the end, the story of Olivia and Ranger is more than just about stopping a criminal network or seizing a deadly weapon. It is about faith, loyalty, and the mysterious ways God works in our lives. Sometimes his miracles don't arrive with thunder or angels in radiant light. Sometimes they come quietly, through the instincts of a faithful dog, through the courage of ordinary people standing firm against darkness. Just as Ranger refused to be silenced, guiding Olivia toward the truth, we too are called to listen for those subtle signs in our everyday lives. The gentle nudges, the inner voice, the quiet blessings. God places guardians around us, not always in the form we expect, but always in the form we need. And so, may this story remind us that no matter how dangerous or uncertain the world may seem, there is always light, there is always protection, and there are always miracles, sometimes with fur and loyal eyes. May God bless you, your families, and may His silent guardians watch over your life as they did for Olivia and Ranger. Before we close, I invite you. Share this story with someone who needs hope, leave a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so more people can hear these stories of courage, faith, and love. And may God's grace surround everyone watching, tonight and always.